Thank you so much for joining me on another episode of Kickoff Sessions. I think our mix between your book, your LinkedIn, and my podcast is a fantastic mix for today, all around careers for younger people, slightly older people, or just people in general who are looking to essentially ignite their career, just like your book.
Thanks so much, Darren. I'm thrilled to be here.
Yeah, it's really good though, because it's a good mix, and I think with all the experience you have, like over 20 years experience now, and then for someone like myself who has 2-3 years experience, it's a good like mix, because we're trying to accumulate that, I suppose, but trying to get to the right I don't know, try to do the right things along the way can be quite difficult. And it's only with retrospect you can look back and say, I should have taken that job, or I shouldn't have done that interview. I should have done this differently. So I think maybe from yourself, just getting your perspective would be great like that, you know? So before we get going, if you want to give a short background to yourself and why you're expert of the day for careers.
Absolutely. So Darren, I am a partner at the O'Connell Group, and we are a recruiting firm specializing in marketing and market research. I have been here for over 25 years. Before that, I spent a decade in marketing at companies such as Johnson & Johnson, Kraft, Herman Miller, and a division of Nestle Purina. Went to Kellogg Business School, spent a stint in retail, went to Tufts. And I will tell you, out of college, I had no clue what I wanted to do, really and truly. I fell into retail. And while there, I was in a training program. And my first year, I was in the cosmetic department as assistant manager, loved it. And the second year, I was supposed to go be an assistant buyer. And something inside me said, I can't do that. That is not right. And shockingly, I went to HR and said, I don't think I can do that job. And I looked back on that and said, how could I do that? But I was really lucky because HR was open and they said, okay, well, we happen to have a position here in HR. What do you think about that? And I was like, okay, I'll try that. Moved into HR, loved it, but also missed being part of the business, which is what took me to Kellogg Business School. And I was so lucky to get in there. And while there, I fell in love with marketing, which is what took me into brand for that decade. And in my brand career, I was good, not great. There were parts of my job I was really great at, and there were other parts that were a real grind. I got through, but it was not easy. I had to work twice as hard as other people. And it wasn't until my company was sold that I called my favorite recruiter and said, get me a job in St. Louis, Missouri, where we live. We wanted to raise our kids there. And he threw out, come work for me. That it really made me think, well, okay, that's out of the blue. But it made me step back and say, what are the favorite parts of my job? And when I did that analysis, Darren, it became really evident that every single part of the job that I loved had to do with people. It was dealing with people, it was interacting with people. And as I thought about it, the recruiting field, every single thing you did dealt with people. And I talked to mentors and they all said, I think you'd be really good at that. Go try it for a year. You can always come back. And as I stepped into recruiting from day one, it felt like breathing. And it almost felt easy. And I was really good at it. So good that it felt, I felt guilty because it didn't feel like working. It was really weird. And after about 10 years in recruiting at the O'Connell Group, where I've been the entire time, my boss had us take something called Strength Finders, which kind of isolates your strengths. And doing that, that's when I realized why I was good, because all of my strengths tied into dealing with people. So that was the aha moment for me. Oh, this is why I'm good at this. So that's a long-winded explanation of my background. And you know, it was really through my 25 years at O'Connell Group, which I've loved. I've mentored a lot of college kids, done presentations, came to the realization that there's a need out there for the information that we share with our candidates. And that's why I wrote this book, for college kids, students, young professionals, and career changers to really help them find their strengths and align their strengths with their career and help them achieve what I did.
That's awesome as well, because like it seems like, you know, it took you so long to identify where your strengths were, but you always had
Yeah.
them. It's not like you were just trying to try different things. You know, you could see that you're
Mm.
outgoing, you're sociable, you could communicate and build relationships. And I'm quite similar as well. Like I'm not technical, even though I'd work in a technical role sometimes.
Yeah.
Whereas like a lot of my strengths would lie on the client side, would lie with stakeholders, and I've naturally gravitated towards. But I suppose when you just start off your career, it's very difficult to know what you're good at and what you're kind of bad at, you know. So starting from like ground zero, even approaching things like your skills and things like this, would you kind of encourage getting a broad base knowledge and kind of awareness of different areas so that you could find out what your skills are and what your kind of weaknesses are? Or do you think you should be trying to figure out, okay, for myself, I'm a good communicator, maybe let's work hard on improving that skill until I develop it further? Like how would you kind of think about something like that?
It's a great question. So, the first chapter of my book is figure out your superpowers and your
Mm,
strengths. And I really believe the earlier you can do that, the better off you are. So if you, and people are even doing it now with high school kids and certainly with college kids, but if you can figure out how your brain is wired, and taking a step back, there are two different types of strengths. Some are how your brain is wired. So what your innate strengths are and what your innate weaknesses are. And those over time will not change. It's like you said, you are just a people person and you're outgoing and you can connect with anybody. That analytical muscle, while you can move the needle a little bit, it's never going to be a superpower.
mm,
The other ones are what I call developmental, and they're just things you haven't done yet. Once you're exposed to them and you practice them over and over, you can convert those to strengths. So we're not talking about those things. But if you can figure out how your brain is wired, and there are assessments you can take, then what you can do out of the blocks is look at careers where you're set up for success day one versus like I did, thinking about going into that buyer role. My intuition told me, danger, 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 don't go there. This will not end well. But I didn't know why. But if had
mm,
I taken that assessment, I would have known, oh, it's because the analytical part is not ever going to be my strong suit. So I'm not set up to be a superstar here. So it should not be a role that I go into. It's just not going to be where I am a huge success. So the other thing in college, if you think about it, I know that there were so many choices and so many directions you could go into that it kind of is overwhelming. And you also look at your peers. You said you went to Accenture and
mm.
great credential and everything else. People who go to McKinsey and Amazon and all these really big names. And you look at them and kind of think, wow, I should be doing something like that. And it's called fear of missing out, or FOMO. When in reality, if you knew your strengths and where they took you to, you might still be envious of that person. It's like, that's cool. Joe's going to Amazon and it's great he got that job, but boy, I would not be successful there. And I know that about myself. I should be going to this artist colony because I am a creative soul. And that's where I'm going to make my mark. If you know that, it's powerful and it grounds you and it sets you on the right path from day one. So that's what I would urge people to do. There are two different tests that I love. One is called Strengths Finders, and the other one is called U Science, YOU Science. Strengths Finders asks you to share your perception. Do you like A or B better? And you tell them that. And out of that, it gives you, here are your 5 strengths. Here's some careers where you could use them. U Science has you play 9 8-minute computer games. And from those, it tells you how your brain is hardwired. Again, giving you 5 different strengths and where you could take them. I tell people to take both of them. But when they do, they kind of walk away saying, wow, I feel like somebody just read my diary. This is really freaky, but it's also really good knowledge to have. And I think will help young people as well as people who are struggling because they're just not hitting their stride in their role and they feel like they may be in the wrong place.
Yeah, I completely agree. Especially like young people, super influenced, especially myself. So when I
Yes.
moved into something like Accenture, now consulting was a great choice for me actually in terms of a skill set because I can just talk garbage for
Yes.
days. But
Yeah.
having said that, though, it wasn't exactly what I wanted to do, and because of that, I felt that I picked that choice because it was more, I don't know, what is it as strong as a word to say, social pressure, but definitely because of the fact that everyone had been going for those types of companies, it had
Sure.
definitely influenced me subconsciously. And I ended up doing something like that. And I actually just wrote a LinkedIn post about that today, how, when you're younger, you're easily influenced to making these decisions. And that's where it becomes more difficult because it's like, as you said there about the other courses you'd like to do or other paths, like I would often like fantasize about working in straight up finance. It could be like, as a quant trader or whatever. I'm very interested in that area, but I know myself I wouldn't be fantastic at it.
Right.
So it's like, just because I kind of like the idea of it could be Wall Street or whatever doesn't necessarily mean that's suited towards me. So I think trying to take that bird's eye view and not taking other people's opinions, which is so difficult to do in the first place, is very important in career, because when you're looking at this as well, it's difficult to change career, or at least a time period is quite difficult. So, you might go with a
Yeah.
company for a year or 2 years and then make a decision then. So it's not like we're making these decisions overnight. So I suppose,
Right.
what other kind of advice would you have from ground zero? So apart from skills, but where do you go from there to say, okay, I've decided to look at company X, Y, and Z. How should I know that this is where I want to go? Because some grad programs actually lock you in. I don't know, is that common in the States? But some of them you're actually locked in for 2 to 3 years as a contract,
Yeah.
because they'll either pay your
Ah,
your bill, your not your bills, but your
right.
exams or something like that.
Yes.
So they are big
Yeah.
investments. That's kind of
Right.
one thing to consider.
Right. Well, and if that is the case, then I would tell you, you go in eyes wide open,
Mm-hmm.
and you go in saying, I'm signing up for this tour of duty. It's kind of like here in the States, if somebody, the military pays, and you go in and you're paying back. And what I would tell you in that case is your goal is to build your skills and to check off as many boxes as you can as you're doing your tour of duty. So it might be analytical, it might be project management, it might be leadership, but take that time to learn as much as you can, to develop relationships, to find mentors, to network throughout the company, and to also figure out, what do I like and what don't I like? Because that is really critical as you think about where do you go from here. And having crystallize both of those things will help you figure out where to go. The other thing that I think is really important, and I have a chapter dedicated to this, is culture fit. It's how do you feel about the company, and what elements of the culture resonate with you, and what would you really like to change? Do you like the process that they have, or does it drive you crazy? You've got to get 5 approvals. Do you like the fact that it's 9 to 5 and you can leave, or would you rather have it now after COVID work from home? Or do you want to be someplace where you're in the office and you get to see people and you guys go out after work? So figuring out those things as well is really important. And I think a lot of young professionals entered the workforce during COVID. So some people have never been in the office, and now they're thinking, I like this work from home. And my only counsel to them would be, give it a chance, because I think getting in the office, being around other people is really important. And those lunchtime conversations and going out for a beer after work, and building those friendships, which, yes, you can build a relationship like we are right now, Darren, but it's a very different thing in person. So work from home is nice, but I think there's something to be said about hybrid versus pure work from home. That's just my perspective.
I agree with you as well. Like, so I joined my recent company, Revolut, remotely
Yeah,
in January now. So I've been remote the entire time, but the whole company has actually been remote, which is quite funny. As in, everyone
yeah,
is like a new joiner because it's kind of a startup. So like, there's
yeah,
so much people join the company, but it's interesting because like, yeah, as exactly as you said, it's kind of like when you do something really difficult with someone. If you're like, you know, playing a sport or doing an activity or things like this, you build a relationship with them, and you kind of lose that when you are remote. But what I have seen, which has helped me a lot, is
yeah,
because we are remote and I'm in a global company, I just have all these 15, 30-minute meetings with people. I'll literally just put 15 minutes in someone's diary, but like, hey, do you want to catch up? They could be based in Singapore, they could be based in New
yeah,
York. And it's fantastic like that because the culture is set up for let's do these short meetings and things like this.
yes,
So it's as if we still have a baseline understanding, but I get you. There's no depth to the
yeah,
real like conversation if it's only for 15 minutes or whatnot, you know. But that's
yeah,
really interesting because I think you touched on a good point there about, you know, building a connection, building a network. And I think that word, I suppose, is nearly almost looked down on when people are saying like build a network straight away when they just come out of college, because people don't understand the power and the importance of it and why it's so important. People just think, oh, I'll do my work. I definitely thought that when I first did my internship in London with State
yeah,
Street. It's funny to look back on now, but I always thought that like the work will do itself and that will be enough. But having said that, a year later, my mentor, my manager, I still keep in contact with, and the importance of building a good trusting relationship, and that's someone who can stay in your corner and fight for you when you need to and things like this and give you advice has been really helpful, you know. So when people join companies, how would you advise people to kind of build build a network that is natural and kind of organic, and that they can,
yeah.
I presume, really kind of improve the relationship throughout time and throughout years?
Yeah, and I'll talk about that and then I'll talk beyond that. So I am a huge believer in networking, and not networking when you need a job, but networking for life. And that it really can it can strengthen not just your career, but your life. And so as you're talking about it, networking when you're working at a company, you get to know the people you work with intimately, and that's great. But if anybody leaves today, you're so lucky because you have LinkedIn and you have cell phones. You can text people, but it's so much easier to touch, and you want to make sure you really do that. Then the other thing is there are going to be other people, like you said, that you come in contact with. If you're in person, and in my world in marketing way back when, you know, ask the operations person to grab a coffee if it's somebody you respect or you like, but reach out of your immediate network and network throughout the company. Ask a VP if they'd give you advice on, you know, a couple different jobs you've been offered, but just have tentacles throughout and make it your mission to network, and not network with a can you get me a job in mind. Network with a I want to get to know you, I want to get your story, I want to hear your wisdom, tell me about any mistakes you've seen other people like me make, and can I, you know, come back and just make sure I stay in touch with you. So you want to do that at your company, but I would tell you, Darren, you want to go back to, this sounds weird, your high school, your college, um, family and friends who you grew up with and happen to be in your industry. These are all people you have something in common with. And so you really want to network with them as well. And the broader your network, the more powerful it is. And you want to reach up and out, but also down. And you want to make sure you're giving back to people. And then if and when you do need a job, it's so easy to activate that muscle versus trying to do it cold. And it's so natural. So I'm a huge proponent in networking and staying in touch. And a great example is with my book, because I network, and part of networking is my job, but instinctively I've done it forever. Because of that, when I wrote my book, I was able to reach out to people like Bob Eckert, who was the past CEO of Mattel, who had been my boss at Kraft. and people like Mike Kernish, who had been a candidate of mine, but also was head of books at Amazon, and Mike Barkley, who is CEO at Kind Snacks, and all these people who are really high up, but were delighted to write recommendations in my book because of the relationship that I had built through networking. So huge proponent. It's a really important thing to do. It's as important as anything else you do. And I would tell people, think about it like an annuity. Spend 10 minutes a day networking, and it will pay back in spades throughout your entire career.
Yeah, I completely agree. Because I think what's so cool as well that you said there was, as you grew up in your career, as you expanded your career, the people that were around you became more specialized, became more professional, more senior, and then you could leverage off them when you needed to. And I can see that myself, as you said there about networking kind of organically or, just naturally. Like a lot of my friends they're all very intelligent people. They're all, even my classmates, people that are in different careers completely. And they're all kind of doing their own natural career cycle now. So again, you touch off these people and they'll similarly touch off you when you get to those stages. But I think a great approach is, because I'm not a big like texter or emailer. I'll just send voice notes to my mates. So even guys that were in a center with me, I'll just literally send 30-second voice note, check in, see how they're doing, see how their work is, things like this. And leave it at that, because again, we could be all different sides of the world and things like this. But the main thing is that we stay connected because one, we want to, and because we're kind of like friends and whatnot. But I think there's many different benefits to it, So I think that's a huge area that I think cannot be stressed enough.
Absolutely. And the beauty of it is then, some of these people have reached out to me, so asking me to help their kids. And it's so awesome when the circle comes around and I can do something back for them. So it's really cool.
And it's cool as well how, you're looking for like career advice. People need it from yourself. But again, it's like these principles haven't changed, 20 years ago, it's still, you're looking to figure out your skills there, trying to build a network, So on the topic of building a network or changing careers and trying to navigate different careers. So if you are experienced or you've gathered a couple of years experience, but you think that it's time to change company or even change industry, how would you kind of navigate doing that from leaving company A to company B? So a little bit of background. So my background is in tech. I did business information systems. So it's kind of like, it's like business with software engineering, not that much software engineering now, but kind of like that. So I was in consulting from there. It was pretty natural, but I wanted to transition into finance. And even though I still consider myself to be underqualified for my role, I made that decision to move across into a more finance role, which was difficult. And it took me quite some time, and I had to be very, very calculated with how my CV was prepared and how I went around interviewing in terms of using the skills from job A for job B. But, how would you recommend making those types of transitions, and what sort of process would you follow?
Yes, that's a great question. So I think you really touched on something very important, which is whatever you're doing today, you have built skills. And so the key thing is to know what those skills are, analytical, project management, leadership, whatever those things are, and be able to really demonstrate those skills and have examples how those skills have helped you deliver results, because that's the key. Responsibilities, but then, what have you done and what have you delivered? And you want to be able to help them see how those skills will translate into a new industry. And that is the key to doing it well. But Darren, in my book, I have an analogy, which is you think about your career like a tree. And your goal in my world in marketing is to build a sturdy trunk and then to get up as high up on the tree before you branch out. What you're talking about is kind of building a new tree. So it's figuring out what your skills are that are transferable, but you're probably going to have to build a new tree, which means that not everything's going to be transferable. You're going to have to learn a new category. Like you said, it's going to be more challenging because you've got to paint the picture for them. It's not an obvious one. So you may have to come down a level. You may have to come down a little bit on compensation because you are going to be learning more than you would if you were staying on your same tree. And so it's how clear is your resume? How clear have you demonstrated what your skills are, your results? And then how clear can you paint the picture in the interview itself? Meaning, this is what I did, this is what I delivered, and this is why it is transferable and relevant in your industry. So it's the 1, 2, 3 punch is what I think you have to do.
Mm-hmm. That's interesting because a lot of people get too caught up on what they don't know. So they could
Yes.
figure out, be like, oh, I don't know anything about this, but I think what's a very humbling experience is if you're in an interview is just to say straight up to understand it. You have your strengths over here and this is what I am lacking or I'm going to learn. So what happened to me in that situation was similar to there. I had, like, let's say, the project management skills, which is what we needed or whatever. And what I lacked is obviously the finance background and the finance
Yes.
knowledge. And I just said that, I've been always interested in the area, I'm really interested in it. I want to learn more about it, but all the other mechanics of my day-to-day activity, I understand those. And here's my experience. I've delivered these projects. The consultant in me will always go on delivery, which is so important for interviewing or career changes. And then I would have had all of these different segments of pieces of work. You don't even need that many. I had like 2 or 3 different areas that I felt I had worked well on. And then we said that, okay, now the gaps are in these areas of finance, but I'm willing to learn and to really progress on over a series of time. And I think when you are still 2 to 3 years experience and you're quite young, you're not meant to know everything. So I think even it was the CEO of my company who actually is my actual manager now, who's actually a mentor and friend. And I think she even she recognized that he didn't need to know everything at the time. He was coming in for this role and he has all the other stuff. And now I've been actively working on the black spots or the blind spots that I've always had in my kind of inventory at the time. So yeah, it's quite an interesting concept and approach saying that I don't need to know everything and I'll fill in the gaps.
Well, and I think there you can also have an example where you can demonstrate where you pick something up very quickly and you went above and beyond to close a gap. Like we talked about before, a developmental gap. Here was something that I had to learn. Here, the plan I put in place, here are the steps I took and how I converted that from an opportunity area to a strength. And an example like that also shows you don't look to them to solve your problem, you proactively go at it. And those are the type of people that companies want to hire.
Yeah. I think what's interesting there is that it's all based off, I will be able to acquire these skills. I'll be able to master it down the road. And they kind of have trust and faith in you that, okay, this person has built so much experience in a certain area. It's transferable and it will again, figure it out as they go along. How do you, with your experience, what's your thoughts on transition courses or some sort of further education to bridge a gap when people want to change career or move in a different area? So again, a background story. When was it? I think it was maybe June, July of 2020. And I wanted to make the move into finance and I was considering different master's programs. So I actually got one scholarship, which was in a university in Dublin, but it was 2 years. And in my head, I was thinking, could I really stick this out for 2 years? Because I really didn't want to do it. I didn't want to do the master's as a transition because I just didn't want to put that time into still being in a company and working for 2 years on education. So there was that option, which I decided not to do. Second option then was to take 1 year out and do a master's in London, which was €40,000, okay, which is like $60,000. And I decided against that because I didn't have the money to do that. So in the end, I did nothing. And then I just worked harder on my interviewing and whatnot. But what would you recommend? Do you think transition courses are a good way to bridge the gap and take some time out to do something like that?
Um, I think it depends on the situation and the person. For you, I think you found an opportunity that's going to give you the real life experience and the just-in-time training that's going to help you fill your gaps. I think some other people, depending on, you know, how they learn, I think it also depends how people learn. Some people learn much better by doing, and they retain the information much better that way. Some people learn better, you know, through school, and then complementing that by doing that 1-2 punch sticks with them better. And so I think knowing yourself, and I will tell you, Darren, I come at it two different ways because I have 2 kids in business school right now in the US. One of them is getting an executive MBA, so she's still working because she is in the music industry and she doesn't want to leave it. She wants to continue on the same trajectory. She just wants to augment her analytical skills. Her goal is to hopefully one day run a label. And she felt like she had some gaps. So she's just working really hard while she works and augmenting. My son wanted to transition. And so in the US, the best way to transition is to go back and get your MBA. And that way you really get to explore a lot of things. So he's at Northwestern at Kellogg Business School. He was at Amazon. Now he's doing a startup for his internship. So for him, it's the right thing, but it's not for everybody. So I think it depends on the person. I also have a lot of candidates with digital e-commerce, you know, going crazy in the marketing world. They are taking online classes through top universities to really build that skill set while they work. So they're doing that too as they want to transition to it. So they're getting the knowledge and then they're trying to build their skill set internally and then move. So they're doing it that way. So there are all different ways you can do it. And yours was one, my kids are one, and my candidates are another one.
Yeah, it always is subjective to the individual.
Yes.
And just depends what suits them best, you know.
Yeah.
But again,
yeah.
all these things they should be like taken with a lot of like consideration. I think that's the main takeaway there. You know, it's
yes.
that you shouldn't jump in to do a master's because your friend is doing it, or
No.
it seems like, or the college is telling you to do it. You know, because they'll obviously just want more students and want people to apply. So I think you need someone that is in your corner, which is an objective view maybe, and going to give you some sound, proper advice is my main takeaway.
And that's where that networking and the mentors, the people who are senior, can really help you think through. And part of that also ties into if you have a sense for where do you want to be long-term, that will help you make some of the decisions. You know, some, depending on where you want to be long-term in the US, some companies require you to get that master's, some don't, you know, and so the mentor will be able to help you kind of think through what makes the most sense.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, I completely agree as well. So I think that's a good way actually to discuss around, like, you know, pushing on your career and really moving up. So again, you know, pretty ambitious guy. I'd like to see, you know, like myself progress through a career approach over the next couple of years, hopefully get to some sort of leadership roles relatively soon. You know, I'd like to be able to push towards something like that. But I suppose my kind of question is, how would I kind of enable myself to get to those different types of roles, or anyone that's listening? So how would you really approach something like that, from moving from a role which by you manage yourself towards maybe going to the next stage? So a lot of people would work maybe in tech companies, consulting firms, or something like this. And to get to that stage whereby you go from 2 to 3 years experience to maybe 4 to 5 years experience of sound actual experience, what would you recommend?
So I'm going to come at it a different way. My book has a chapter about the phases of your career. And I believe there are three phases. There's learn, do, leverage. And like you said, you're an ambitious guy and you want to move really fast. And what I tell people is take a breath, because it is really important in that early phase, that learn phase, to build a really strong foundation and to get, to learn best practices. Because before you get to the doing phase, you want to know how to do everything really well. Because when you get to the doing phase, you have people working for you and you've got to teach other people. And if you moved really fast, like in my world in marketing, somebody might, be at a big company and be offered a job to move after 2 years and go to a much smaller company where even they're heading up marketing. And I've had people do this where they're like, yes, I move really fast. My title's director. But the problem is they haven't built all their skill sets. They have nobody to continue to learn from. And they've moved to the doing or even the leveraging phase way too fast. And it's actually detrimental to their long-term career. So I would tell you, while you want to move fast, the best way to build your long-term career is make sure in that foundational time that you get best practices, which means either working for a big company or working for people who can teach you best practices, so that in that doing phase, you know what you're doing, you can teach others, you can deliver superior results. Then when you get to the leveraging phase, what happens there is you have a lot of people working for you and you're really not doing the work. You're managing the people who are doing the work, who are delivering the results.
Okay, yeah, that's
Does that make sense?
100%, because I can even see that that's why people might get stuck in middle management roles, because they've got to that position, they can manage a team of, I don't know, a small project team, but they don't necessarily have the skills to go on any further. And I could even see that myself, because where I'm at the moment, I suppose I would know some things, but then there would also be, clear gaps in my knowledge, in my experience. And like, it's kind of like if someone asks you a question, you know it. If someone asks you the next question, you kind of don't know it. If someone asks you the third question, you don't know it, So that goes on with the depth of knowledge and understanding and awareness, which is huge. And to discuss anything, in a good way to describe it is like if you were to explain, I don't know, to talk about a topic, you'd need to really be able to talk about something for 10 minutes to be able to really understand it and go into detail. I think that's a good kind of version of what it's going to be like if you're not doing it anymore. Because we all know like people that are just constantly, offloading work and delegating work, because I suppose at that stage, they don't have the ability to go and actually do it any further.
Right. Yeah, so I would just tell you, think about building a strong foundation. And even in the conclusion of the book, I talk about a candidate who, kind of junior, and, I had an offer at a training company for him, but he also got 2 other offers. He was a really good interviewer that had more money, bigger title, but we talked about this concept and he came back to me and said, you know what? I really thought about what you said, and I have my entire life to make a lot of money. I only have today to build my foundation. And I have watched him, and he got promoted. He went to the foundational company and he continued to build his foundation, and he got promoted, and he is a superstar, and he is going to be a shining star because of that foundation. Had he gone to the other companies, he would have faltered. So it's thinking long-term. And believe me, Darren, as people read my book, they will laugh because they'll see all the places I screwed up. I mean, I did time and time again. I wish I had me in my ear back then, because I would have stopped making a lot of mistakes.
And that's quite interesting as well, when you said about people moving to a company, potentially going up, but then stagnating, versus if you move to a role that you're more comfortable on, you learn more, and then potentially like move up faster or make much more better career decisions over a longer period. Because I suppose that's how companies will get you as well, as in how lower you in is they'll give you the 10% or 20% pay increase, the new title. But again, you could be stuck at this level then for 3 to 5 years, whereas that's not the actual correct path.
Well, another thing, I'm really big on visuals, is think about it this way. if you go into a new company in a job you've already done, you know how to do the job. The company is new, the culture's new, the people are new. So there's a lot of new. But if you know the job, you can actually go in and be a superstar because you know what you're doing. If, though, everything else is new and the job is new, you've never done it before, it's impossible to be a superstar walking in the door. And the thing for people to remember is first impressions are lasting impressions. Mm. So I tell people it's often better to go in laterally and blow them away and get promoted, because the other thing on a resume, getting promoted in a move says you interview well. It says nothing else. Getting promoted at a company says you perform well. It's a much more powerful move.
That's so interesting. Yeah, I never thought about it like that, because again, when you're in interviews, people always ask you, have you been promoted in your company? Have you shown progression? Has there been career progression? So yeah, that's definitely the way forward, because otherwise you could move into a contract role, which I'm not too sure are they very common in the States, but definitely in the UK. Yeah. In the UK, they're hugely popular, and essentially you can go in and get a day rate contract of £600 a day. But that doesn't necessarily mean that you're good in the role, because contract roles are short. They're 3 months, whatever. Because you could have several ones, but not be moving up or getting promoted.
Right.
Interesting concept, But Kris, I'd like to say a massive thank you. I really appreciate all your time. We have went through, more than enough for one day, but I think I'd love to do something similar again in the future, because I think what's awesome is just the fact that I think that all this stuff is just so transferable, and it doesn't matter what your background, what your career is. We all are going through similar difficulties and similar scenarios a lot of the time. So getting your advice and your feedback has been awesome today.
Awesome. Well, it was great chatting with you. I really loved it.